Tonight we're going to bring to you a gentleman that had something happen. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get him on the line. Bruce, good evening. Welcome to Fringe Radio.
Hey, Pat. All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I am honored to have you. I have wanted to interview you for so long because I have heard about your story for so long.
Yeah, that's great. I've been on a lot of interviews, but never with a pilot like yourself. So we have something in common, which is should make an interesting conversation.
Without a doubt, we sure can. Bruce, for the listeners that don't know about your story and your background, you want to give our listeners a little bit of your backstory and your background, and we'll get talking about some of these things that have happened. And we got a ton of questions that people sent in for you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, would you like me to explain to you what happened to me first
Sure,
of all that
sure.
got me into all this?
Sure,
back
man.
in December 4th of 1970?
Go ahead. We're good.
Okay, well, it was on a flight to Andros Island in the Bahamas. So we would fly from Palm Beach International in Florida, and my dad and I were developers, and we had a business partner. And we were working on a project in Andros Island, which is about 200 miles from Palm Beach. And I had made this flight about a dozen times previous. And so it was getting to be pretty routine. And what happened was not routine at all on the return flight from Andros. And it happened that morning of December 4th. There was a large storm system over Andros, and back then we really couldn't get any weather reports, well, from Andros Island anyway, because there weren't any telephones there.
Right.
And we had to just wait for the weather to clear, and then it finally cleared around 3 p.m., and so we took off, and I was flying in a brand-new Bonanza A36. That's a single-engine airplane that cruises at almost 200 miles an hour, and
right.
One of the best planes made for single engine. And it was a mist when we took off, light rain and overcast at about 1,500 feet. So we cruised at 1,000 feet over the island of Andros. And when we cleared the island of Andros, I could see over the Great Bahama Bank that the storm system was only over the mainland of Andros.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked like it was clear weather. But I noticed a strange cloud offshore of Andros, a couple miles offshore, and it was lenticular shape. And it was, you could call it like a lenticular cloud, but they normally only form it at 20,000 feet or so, and this was only like about 500 feet hovering over the Bahama Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't really think about it at the time. It looked harmless, and I didn't think it was unusual, or didn't worry about it anyway, because it looked so harmless. So I went ahead and climbed up over it because it was right in our flight path.
But obviously it was something, Bruce. It was a little bit different.
It was a little bit different.
Yeah, a little bit out of the ordinary.
A little bit out of the ordinary, yeah. But it had real smooth edges on it, and lenticular shape, maybe a mile long and half mile wide and 1,000 feet thick. And so we went ahead and just climbed right up over it. And then when I got up to enough altitude, about 3,000 feet, I was able to contact Miami radio for the first time. I made contact with Florida and followed my flight plan, got a weather report. They said the weather was good between Andros and Miami. There were some scattered thunderstorms over Florida that were fairly large, but we'd probably be able to circumnavigate them. And so that sounded good. And so I wasn't really concentrating on this harmless-looking lenticular cloud underneath me while I was doing all this flight planning. Although my father was with me, and he was co-pilot, but he was more of a navigator, and we had a business partner with us in the back seat. And when I started concentrating more on flying the airplane, I looked around, I said, what? saw another strange thing. It's like this small lenticular cloud apparently had spread out at an incredible rate, and it was right below the airplane now. And I was still climbing up, I'm like 5,000 feet now, and here's this cloud right below the belly of the airplane, and it's spreading out on the sides of the airplane too. So I kept climbing up at about 1,000 feet a minute, and it's climbing right up at the same rate as me. And then it climbs faster than me, and I go inside this cloud. And it appeared to look like a normal cloud. Visibility was very low, and only 100 feet or so at the most. And what happened, it would boost me out of the cloud because it was rising up, and then I'd break free. But then I could only get a few hundred feet above it, and then it would catch up to me again. And I was thinking it was probably like a cumulonimbus storm. It just happened to form.
Right. It was kind of bubbling up underneath you.
Yeah.
Right.
I was thinking this was normal, but it wasn't normal. And I was flying and climbing at 1,000 feet per minute and going forward at 110 miles an hour. And this storm had spread out way faster than 110 miles an hour. And I didn't think of that at the time. And so I just keep climbing, and then after we got up to over 10,000 feet, my dad said, maybe we better head back to Andros. And I didn't really want to head back there because I'd have to fly through this storm again, and I didn't have oxygen, and
right.
I'd be flying through it.
Bruce, I got to stop you just for a second. We got to take a quick break for our other stations for them to pause. Our guest tonight is Bruce Gernon. Go check out his website at electricfog.com. We're going to be talking about his book. We're just starting to talk about his experience. It's an honor to have him on the show. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Fringe Radio. Stick around. We've got an amazing night ahead. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are with Bruce Gernon tonight for the first hour. Again, Bruce, thank you for taking the time to share with us for on your Saturday night. This cloud, we were talking right before we went to the break, how the cloud formed, and then you talked about going back. So let's go ahead and pick up with that. Yeah,
Pat, I'll try to explain this abbreviately, because I get a little carried away sometimes talking about the details of this.
No, that's
so much more to learn from it.
Because it's in the details, really yet.
Yeah, well, finally, when I reached 11,500 feet, I broke free of the cloud. And then when I looked behind me to see what this little lenticular cloud looked like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was this huge, I thought it was a squall. And it was on either side of me, behind me, and what was odd was it seemed to be like perfectly symmetrically curved in the shape of a semicircle as far as I could see on either side, which is like at least 10 miles on either side. And that's what I noticed. What was strange about it was the curve was near perfect, and it was climbing up now. Maybe it was 20 or 30,000 feet high, and I had just broken free of it, and I'm in clear sky now. So I leveled off and went to cruising speed of 195 miles an hour, and tried to forget about this thing that I just experienced and concentrate on flying the airplane. And then in just a few more minutes later, like 5 minutes later, I look in front of me, here's another storm. Only this time, the curve is in front of me instead of behind me, and it's perfectly symmetrical again, and now it's built up to maybe 50,000 feet, and I notice that I can't fly underneath it because it's laying right on the surface of the ocean. So I penetrated into the side of it because I was on a direct flight path from Andros to Bimini using my electronic instruments. And when I penetrated into it, this time the visibility was better. I could see the ocean, but these intense lightning flashes started going on, and they became more intense the deeper I went. And there wasn't any precipitation, but the lightning got so strong that I couldn't take it anymore, so I made a sharp turn to the left, to the south, and I was about 100 miles away from Miami at the time. And so I called up Miami radio that I had been in contact with when I filed my flight plan and told them I had just deviated from my flight path, and I was going to see if I could fly around this storm. And I was like 100 miles east of them. And so I went due south, and while I'm heading south along the curve of this storm, I noticed that the curve goes all the way back to where I had come from. And so I surmised that it was connected in a circular shape. And so I couldn't go back to Andros now.
Right, right.
And so then I noticed that two ends of the storm met, and it was like at the opposite end of where it was born. And when they met at the bottom first, on the surface of the Earth, and then these two big anvil heads formed on the top, and it formed a tunnel in between the clouds. And the tunnel was about 10 miles long, and it was directly toward Miami Beach, where I was heading to West Palm Beach, but Miami'd be okay. So I decided that I'd try to go through this tunnel. And I consulted with my dad, and he agreed. We felt like that was the only way out of this storm system. And so we had to dive down to 10,000 feet, just a little bit lower than we were, and we shot through the tunnel. And when I entered this tunnel, that's the first really incredible thing just happened that really nobody has so far been able to analyze why the tunnel changed its appearance when I entered into it. These strange swirling lines formed inside the tunnel immediately upon when I entered it. And it should have taken me about 3 minutes to reach the other end, but it only took like 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And when I reached the other end, the tunnel collapsed. And I looked behind me, and I could see it collapsing. And there were contrails on the wingtips, and this strange blue sky that I was supposed to be entering instantly disappeared into this gray, strange phenomena that I call electronic fog. And I have a website called electronicfog.com that sort of explains this, and it has like graphic illustrations that shows how the electronic fog attached itself to the airplane. It took me 30 years to figure this out, how this fog attached to the airplane, and then 3 minutes later, I was in Miami Beach, and I had traveled 100 miles.
Wow.
In only those 3 minutes. That was the most perplexing part of this phenomena that I couldn't understand until I realized that this fog was attached to me. And there's a new theory that a scientist I'm working with that just come out with that relates to that. But anyway, I was in this fog for about 3 minutes, and all my electronic instruments were malfunctioning, and my wet compass was even spinning counterclockwise all by itself. And my dad went into a state of panic, and our passenger, he became nauseous, mm-hmm. and he couldn't even speak normal words anymore. And then all of a sudden, the fog electronically dissipated, and these lines formed parallel to my direction of flight, and it took only about 10 seconds for the lines to turn into cracks and then open up wider and wider, and then all the fog was gone, and it was like, poof, I'm right over Miami Beach. And then the radar controller who was trying to find me finally found me right over Miami Beach, and he was really excited and was yelling at me. He thought he had me right over Miami, and I told him, no, that can't be me because I'm still like 90 miles east. But then my eyes kind of focused, and I could see, yeah, it was Miami right below me. And so then we went on to land at Palm Beach. We had to deviate around some big thunderstorms to get to Palm Beach to the north. And so when I landed, I noticed that the flight only took like 48 minutes. And I'd made this flight many times before, and the fastest I ever did it was an hour and 20 minutes. So
yeah.
I couldn't understand what had just happened, so I realized something important probably happened. It could be important for future science, and so I committed it to memory right at that point when I landed. And then it was like 13 months later, I was watching a TV show on Dick Cavett, and he had Ivan Sanderson, a scientist, that wrote a book about Limbo the Lost, I think he called it, about areas around the world, 12 areas he claimed around the world where there were strange phenomena happening, and then one of them was right off of Miami in the Bahamas there. So that's when I realized that, that's what I had experienced, this unusual phenomena. So I started researching it more and more, and I've discovered some things researching it, so that's why I continue to do it.
Well, let me ask you, Bruce, a couple questions I have, and I've always wanted to ask you these questions when I started reading about your experience. This cloud, did it form under you, or did it chase you down, if you will?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've talked to people where it has chased them in boats, actually.
Okay.
I had one guy that had to outrun the thing at night in a boat, and it had like a green tint to it. And when he made it to the inlet of the Florida coast, it disappeared. Similar to me, when I made it to the mainland of Florida, it electronically dissipated. So I believe it has something to do with the atmosphere. And I believe what happens is it forms in these tunnels. I've seen many of these tunnels. And if you look at my website, you can see some photos of the tunnels that I've taken. But see, nobody's flown through these tunnels. We're working on, with a scientist, David Paris, at the University of Nebraska, trying to get money together to create a drone and fly through one of these tunnels. But NASA would be the one to do it. But see, mainstream science still really hasn't recognized this, so they don't want to spend any money on it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. A couple questions that came in for you was, first of all, did any electronic equipment or the aircraft, the Bonanza, did anything get damaged at all? Anything short out, fuses blown, anything like that, or just things went haywire and then came back?
No, they all went haywire, and they came back. Every one of them came back, so there wasn't any damage, as if it was like a lightning strike, which can do some minor damage to airplanes. No, it wasn't like that. And I've talked to probably over 100 people that have experienced this electronic fog and have survived.
Did any of them have the same consequence, Bruce, where it moved them, where it, I don't know if you want to call it, teleported you, transported you, moved you through time? Did they experience the same things where you actually had? I mean, you've got physical proof that something happened by your trip being cut so short. Compared to experience in it, did anybody else experience the same thing too, where it takes them, let's say, an hour to fly 100 miles or whatever it may be, and like you got there in such an accelerated time period?
Yes. Quite a few of them have. Let me tell you about two of them.
Sure.
That aren't in my book that are quite interesting. One is a real old story, and the other one is somewhat newer. The older one was about a guy right after World War I believe it was, right in between the two wars. He was flying a Gypsy Moth. That's a double winger.
Right, old rag biplane.
Yeah, that was like one of the last ones they came out in World War I. So they were still using it at the beginning of World War II, and that's when I think this happened, just before the war. But his grandchildren contacted me, and I've had a lot of people like that contact me and thank me for bringing this to the world news, so that they don't think they're crazy. But they used to think their grandfather was crazy because he used to tell them that he actually flew through the hands of God. But I can relate to that because that's the way I wanted to end my book, but the editors didn't like that. But he used to tell them the story about him flying in the Gypsy Moth, and he was on an assignment to fly over the Bahamas. I think he was out of the Carolinas. And he did his assignment, and then he ended up flying through, sounds like the same thing I flew through. He went through the tunnel. It's like I'm the only living person, apparently, that's flown through this tunnel. And he did the same thing. And he got totally disoriented after he came out of the tunnel. And then he was able to find land it, and then he found out he was 400 miles off course. And it was late in the night, and so he couldn't make it back to his base. So he waited for the first thing in the morning. And then when he got back to his base in the late morning, he went to the commander of the base, and the commander said, "How the heck did you get here so far ahead of time?"
Mm-hmm.
He, like we're talking about a whole day here.
Right.
He wasn't supposed to come home until the end of the day, and he came back in the morning. And so somehow the time was mainly affected by him, big time. And they used to think he was crazy, but then when they read my book, they said, "Well, he did the same thing as me apparently," and had a time warp and a time change. And so now the other story is a guy named Joe Suter, and he was on TV just recently. I believe it's the Science Channel, where they have a special about the Boeing 747. And he was the chief engineer of the 747. And he had 1,000 engineers working for him when they created that. And he's 90 years old now, and he's still doing fairly good. And they interviewed him. This was a 2-hour special. They'll probably be on again. They're repeating, and it was only on about 6 months ago for the first time. And I met him once in Long Island in Bahamas, and he had a private home there, and he's a well-off guy. And so, but we got talking, and I told him about my story, and so he said, "Okay, I got a story to tell you about me." And he said he was flying one of the Boeings while they were developing them, and he flew, from Boeing Field in Washington, Seattle, and direct to China. And something happened along the way. So he was supposed to land in China. Let's say he took off in the morning, say like a Tuesday morning. So he was supposed to land in China on Tuesday afternoon. So when they landed in China in the afternoon, they found out that it was Wednesday.
Wow.
He lost the whole day, where the other pilot had gained the whole day.
Yeah.
So
it's like an equation. It's got to get balanced out on either side.
Yeah, you can go either way, and those are the two maximum experiences that I know of, and both apparently are very credible, especially Joe Suter, chief engineer for the 747.
Carol writes in, she says, Bruce, can you, as far as your fuel consumption, Did the fuel gauge indicate anything anomalous? I mean, as far as fuel consumption, did you burn fuel? Did you burn as much fuel as you projected, or did you burn a lot less fuel?
Right. Yeah. No, I burned less fuel.
Right.
I found that out a few years later after researching it. One of my physics professors in college came up with that question, and then so we researched my gas receipts that I still had, and it showed that we burned 10 gallons less fuel than normally, that compared to all the other flights that I had made, because we would always top off the tanks because we couldn't get fuel in Andros, so we'd go with full tanks, and when we got back, we'd top them off. And so when we topped them off on December 4th, I still have the original gas receipt. We burned 10 gallons less, which would account for the 100 miles
right
in space and the 30 minutes in time that we would burn those 10 gallons. So it actually saved 10 gallons of gas.
Did your airspeed indicator? I mean, did your airspeed indicator pick up any speed, or did it show the same airspeed all along?
No, the airspeed indicator seemed to be working fine, and the altimeter seemed to be working fine. It was just the electronic and magnetic instruments that were malfunctioning.
So it didn't show any forward increase in speed?
No.
No.
So the latest theory, I've been working with Professor David Paris out of the University of Nebraska for 10 years now. And I've met with him several times. We've been on television together on documentaries. And when we met, he came up with a theory after, discussing this with him, so that he really got a mind picture of what was going on here. And when he first told me this, I couldn't believe it. But then it took me a few days to think about it, and then I just found out, it could be possible. See, when I entered this tunnel 100 miles from Miami, it's 10 miles long. And then when I came out of it, he thinks that when I came out of it, I was instantly 10 miles offshore of Miami. And then it took me those 3 minutes in the fog, the electronic fog, to reach Miami, which would be normal.
Right.
So he's saying somehow like I was like teleported in some sort of a space warp, a linear space warp, he calls it. It would be like 80 miles instantly, like a wormhole, sort of, where you can bend space. Where if you had a sheet of paper, I could show it to you. But you take this flat sheet of paper, and you got a map, and you show 100 miles, and two spots 100 miles apart. But then you take the paper and bend it so that the two spots are meeting.
Right.
And that's what happens. See, I instantly came out at the other end.
Did Florida, did Miami, or what about radar? Did they catch anything anomalous? Anomalous, I should say, on their radar scope? Did they see the storm? Did they see anything a little out of the ordinary?
Not that they reported to me.
Back in the 70s, that wasn't like it is. They record everything. Back then, I know it wasn't. Yeah. They didn't have the standards they have today.
Right, but they did have radar, and they were using it to the best of their abilities to help me. So when I was 100 miles from Miami, I didn't ask them if they had me on radar at that point, but maybe they did. But as soon as I came out of the storm, though, I contacted them and asked them if they had me on radar, and they couldn't find me until the electronic fog dissipated, and then they found me on radar directly over Miami Beach. Wow. 3 minutes later.
When this was all going on, I got a couple $1 million questions for you, but here's the biggest one of them all. When this was all going on, Did you even think back about, the lost flight and the lost ships? Did you sit, when you were, I'm sure you had so much going on, but did you for a second say, this is real, something here is really happening. The truth is here. There is something that goes on out here. Or you just wanted to get the heck out of there?
Yeah. No, when you're a pilot, you got to focus
right.
on, number one, flying the airplane.
Right.
And so that was my main focus, especially when I flew through the tunnel. It's like I couldn't even move my eyes even slightly to the side. I had to concentrate on that hole on the other end.
Now, you said your dad got pretty ill, and so did your other passenger. Did you feel any illness at all, Bruce, or were you just adrenaline up at the red line wanting to get through this thing?
Yeah, no adrenaline, no. Stay calm.
Right.
Calm. I was a pretty good pilot back then, and that's one of the main things when you're a good pilot is you don't get any adrenaline. When the situation gets really bad, you stay completely calm.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I just stayed really calm and concentrated. And I can remember, like my passenger, I said to myself, I have to totally ignore him because he's totally lost his sanity. And my dad, I had to rip the microphone out of his hands because he ripped it off of me and was screaming and yelling cuss words at the air traffic controller, which is you can go to jail for
sure
cussing out over the airwaves like that. You can't do that.
Wow, amazing. So it affected your passenger in the back. It affected him. I mean, was he just scared to death or something else?
Well, I think it was something else. There are people that have become nauseous in it. There's many people that have died that have been in the electronic fog. They get nauseous. And not just that, the spatial disorientation is the main thing. They lose all their navigational instruments, and they don't realize that this fog is attached to them. They think they're flying through fog. And so if their compass is acting up and their electronic navigation's acting up, they don't understand why.
Right. They're engulfed in it.
They depend on that. And then they usually go through a series of turns. And that disorients them even more because, see, I never made one turn when I was in this fog. I realized I was aiming right for Miami.
Right.
So I figured I'm not going to make any turns whatsoever. I'm just going to keep going straight, which I really didn't know what straight was, according to my instruments. Flying by instinct.
Let me ask you, Bruce, did the controls, did the ailerons feel heavy, sloppy? Of course, at that speed, you're not making huge adjustments. But did it feel mushy, gooey? Did you know what I mean? Did it fly the same way?
Yeah, no, I flew the same way. I actually slowed down to 180 miles an hour, the maneuvering speed of the Bonanza, after I entered the fog, because I was confused about what was going on here. I knew it could be dangerous, maybe. I wasn't sure.
Wow. Man-made or natural? What's your theory? Where are you sitting at right now with this whole scenario?
Oh, yeah, well, I've always thought it was man-made. Rob McGregor, my co-author of the book, he's written a lot of new books that talk about what I experienced and new theories that you might want to get with him.
Yes, definitely.
And here explain them to you. But at first I thought it was only man-made, but then I met with Dr. Valentine. He's the one that really discovered me and made me well-known by putting me in a book written by Charles Berlitz, one of the best sellers of all time for the Bermuda Triangle, back in the early 70s. And he was the curator of the Miami Museum, and a really good scientist that did. He was credited with discovering Atlantis, but they're not sure if it's Atlantis still. But that's another long story where Edgar Casey said someone would discover it in 1968, and apparently Dr. Valentine discovered it. But then he sort of discovered me when I met with him and told him my story, and he already knew about the tonal vortex, he called it, and he said that I was the only person to see this from its birth and fly through the heart of it, and then find an exit as it dissipated. If you looked on my website, there's a slideshow that shows in a radar photo of a circular storm not far from where you are in Indiana, where a guy named Don Peltz spent a lot of time working on this, and he was the former sheriff of one of the counties there, head sheriff, and he had this experience on the ground. This can happen on the ground, too, in a car.
Wow.
And so there was like a wall of a storm, similar to the storm I saw, where it was right on the surface, and it was right in front near his car. And his dad was with him, and they saw this storm, and then they see this big sphere, like a orb, sort of maybe a 40-foot diameter sphere of ball lightning type. And another word for electronic fog that I like to call it is called ball lightning cloud.
Mm-hmm.
It's larger than ball lightning. And so this sphere went right in front of his car, and then a tunnel opened up in the wall of the storm, and the spear went through the tunnel. And so he started to get nauseous. He pulled over the side of the road. And let's say it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so. And then all of a sudden it's like 5:30. He lost over 2 hours of time somehow.
How about did you, as far as, you accelerated through time. You didn't lose time. It went the other way for you guys.
Yeah, well, it's so confusing and hard to explain it. It could be forward or backward, It's like I went ahead of time. I got there ahead of time somehow, 30 minutes ahead of time.
Yeah.
So did I go into the future or the past? It kind of depends on how you look at it.
Exactly. Wow. The gentleman, again, I heard about this incident, Bruce, for many, many years. Anyone who's a pilot has come across it. But John Quasar, I had him on the show.
Yeah.
And John had nothing but great things to say about you, and pretty much insisted. He goes, "You got to get a hold of Bruce. You got to get him on and hear his story from his own mouth. You'll be amazed." And John's pretty skeptical, so he had nothing but great things to say.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been working with him for a long time now.
Yeah, he's pretty interesting. Bruce, we've got a few minutes left. Where can our listeners get your book at?
Well, Amazon.com is the easiest way to get it.
Okay.
It's been in publication now for 10 years, and it's written in 7 languages. So hopefully it'll be in publication for a long time, especially since it's one of the greatest mysteries in the world, and it's still not solved yet. And I've been telling this story for so long, and it's like not going to go away until the mystery is solved.
Till you figure it out one of these days. Are you still current? You still fly?
Yeah, I'm a flight instructor, and I'm still current.
All right, now, where are you located at, Bruce?
I'm in Wellington, South Florida.
Okay.
Palm Beach.
Gotcha.
And I live on a private airport with a hangar connected to my house.
Still have a Bonanza?
No, I've owned 2 Bonanzas. My last plane was a late model Cessna 182 Skylane.
Now, your Bonanza was the standard tail. It wasn't the V-tail, was it?
Yeah, they were both the V-tails. Not V-tails. I mean, the one I flew through was the A36 with the standard three tails. Yeah. And you had that double tail.
The 336 Skymaster.
Yeah, that was a great airplane. We flew in. I enjoyed flying that.
Yeah, even till this day, as long as I've been out of it, they have a very unique sound. And right near I live in Salt Lake City. I'm on this. We're on the south end of. Well, I live in a suburb of Salt Lake, and we have an airport that's just to the south of us. And in the summer and spring, when there's a couple of them still left out there at the airport, when they take off, they have such a unique sound. You can hear that. I know it coming from anywhere.
The sound. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so unique. People say
it would be. Yeah, with the two motors lined up like
right.
that.
People say it sounds
the only
like a
plane doing that.
Right. People say, "Oh, it sounds like a 310." It's like it sounds nothing like a 310. It's totally different. It's very unique.
Yeah. It was really safe airplane.
Well, there's still a company. I mean, there's a big club up in Michigan. There's still a lot of them around, and there's actually I believe it's in South Carolina. There's a company that will retrofit. They take the front engine off. They take the rear engine off and put a turboprop on the front, and it's a very roomy airplane.
Wow, that would make even more room probably by doing that.
Yes, yeah, very roomy airplane for its size class. But
that's one of the great parts about that plane. It was a 6-passenger with lots of room.
Yes, with plenty of climb-out power, without a doubt. Going from I always thought when I first started flying an old Skyhawk. I actually started in a 170, and then went to the Skymaster. It was like felt like I was trading places with a 737 when I saw the way it climbed out.
Skymaster is a great plane. I don't think any of those have ever disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle.
A lot of them in Vietnam, for sure. They were an O2 there. Different
over there, yeah.
Right, different thing. Are you going to do any more books, Bruce? Are you?
Actually, I will. I've got all kinds of stories that people have written to me. Probably got well over 100 good stories, like some of the ones I told you tonight.
Right.
That I could add, and then I have new theories and ideas to add to it. And I mean, at the least, I could revise my book someday.
Well, it's an amazing. I don't want to say story because it really happened, but an amazing situation. Maybe if I get a hold of Doug, maybe you could do a little get me some contact info. Maybe get both of you on the program. The hour went way too fast. We got to wrap up here in just a minute, but there's just so much to cover, so much to talk about.
Yeah, well, that's why it's still a mystery. There's still a lot to be discovered out there.
Without a doubt. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you for giving me some time on your Saturday night. Go and relax. And again, thank you for sharing your experience. Again, people can find your book on Amazon, the website electronicfog.com, an amazing site with plenty of things to read through. And I surely hope, Bruce, that you come up. I hope you find the answer you're looking for.
Well, I know I am. It's like right now I am getting contacts with the young kids from 3rd grade, 6th, 7th grade. It's incredible. I mean, I just did a Skype presentation to a school with over 60 of them.
Wow.
And they made apparently they made an assignment for each one of them to write to me for Christmas. It was the best Christmas I ever had, with 60 letters from kids. And mostly they asked me, the two basic questions were, was it fun flying through the Bermuda Triangle? Nobody's ever asked me that. And it's like, I'm thinking about it, it was the most exciting flight I've ever had. In a way, it was fun.
In your aviation career.
Yeah.
I've got to go to NBC News, Bruce. Thank you so much, and let's stay in contact, okay?
Okay, Pat. Nice
talk. Okay, my friend. Take care. Have a happy New Year as well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Bruce Gernon.